morning, everybody. Welcome once again to another edition of BTL Bass Talk Live, where we're going to talk bass fishing and anything else that we want to talk about. Yes, it is the SJR Watch Party. And joining us on day 5, not day 4.
Day 5.
Day 5, Frank Scalish. Frank, how you doing, man?
Good. I got confused. I thought I was in Groundhog Day doing Thursday all over again.
Well, I have to say this first, all right? We made history today, and Matt and I were talking. Matt is not going to be on the show today. Obviously, he's got stuff that he's got to do to get ready for this end of the world that's coming in Oklahoma, and we'll get into that here in a minute. But it is the first time in the 17-year history of doing this show in some capacity that we have had 5 consecutive shows. 5 shows in 5 days, taking up a solid week, and it's never been done before, Frank. So we are crossing new ground right now.
That's crazy. It's crazy. BTL 5 days in a row.
Yeah, that's kind of cool.
It is.
I was extremely fired up about it. We're going to take a day off tomorrow, and then, hey, Matt and I are back on Sunday for the BTL Elite Series postgame show at 7 o'clock, and we'll talk more about that later. But the watch party last year, we kicked it off. It went extremely well, and it's ironic on Bass Track right now, who's leading this thing is the guy that did the watch party last year, Mr. Mark Menendez, in the lead today, having a decent day today on Bass Track, shows him with almost 13 pounds, and he has taken over the league on a very, very interesting body of water, Frank.
Oh, yeah, it's a crazy place. You know, Mark yesterday, I think he ended up in 7th place, but he maintained he maintained the top 3 most of the day yesterday.
Yeah.
He's really on him. I mean, he's really got his pattern set. He's being very consistent. He has a real legitimate chance in the 4 days to take the lead. It just depends what the other guys are going to be, how their fish are going to behave.
Yeah.
Don't forget, yesterday they lost a ton of time with the fog.
Well, that's kind of thrown a wrench in everything, man. Yeah. There were guys that scrapped their plans. There were guys like Gary Klaus, who was leading after day 1, that continued with their plan. He had an hour's worth of fishing. He caught 25 pounds.
Yeah.
And I think the bottom line story of this event is they're looking at him, and they're going to continue to look at him, and it's going to get better as the tournament continues. What are your thoughts, Frank?
Yeah, that's absolutely right. I mean, here's the thing with Florida, and I learned it the hard way because I never really fished down there until I started fishing on the elites. But here's what happens with Florida when there's a cold front or frontal conditions, the bass literally don't bite. You are begging for every scrap you can get. As the water warms, okay, they become more active, and it's like a light switch goes off. One time I was on Okeechobee, and the first day of practice was under 20 degrees. And then the next 2 days of practice were in the mid-20s. I never caught a bass. I didn't even know. I've never seen Okeechobee. I never caught a fish in 3 days of practice. Well, when the tournament came, the first day of the tournament was 60 degrees. Mm-hmm. And I started catching fish. The second day was 70 degrees. I caught more fish. I wound up walking out of there with a check and never even caught a fish in practice. I didn't even know where I was going to go in the tournament, So Florida's crazy. And what you can expect, when we fish, if you want to know what the 40th place cut mark is going to be, usually we double the weight and add a pound.
Yeah.
What I see happening here is you're probably going to have to double the 40th place weight and probably add 3 or 4 pounds. Cause I think two things are taking place. A, the fish are moving. The fact that they're catching them sight fishing means that they're already up there. They're going to start to see more and more of them. And it's just going to get better and better. And they have a full day to fish today. They didn't lose time today. So that's going to be a huge difference. You're going to see guys that might have only caught 8 or 9 pounds yesterday come in with good bags today.
Yeah, good stuff. All right, folks, the one thing about the watch party, if you watched any of it last year with Mark, it's pretty cool. Bass has allowed us to pull in the live feed, and we have BTL fans on that can actually watch the live action on BTL and at the same time interact with Frank and ask Frank questions about what's going on the water while the action is taking place. So once again, many thanks to Bruce and everybody at Bass for allowing us to pull in this feed for 90 minutes and really give some of the fans out there an insight from a guy that's done it, the guy that's been around for a long, long time and knows a lot about what goes on the Elite Series, and Frank Scalish this year. We'll get into that here in a minute. Now, when I get ready to pull the feed in, what we'll do is I'm going to introduce the guests that we have on the feed, and there'll be hopefully some people that go in and out. I know I got bombarded by invitations. I sent a bunch of responses out. The thing about it is we can only have 10 people on at one time. So there might be some people that come into the watch party as we're already into it. For those people that are out there waiting in the queue, if you have a question for Frank, I'm looking at all the people in the queue. Just kind of raise your hand, and then we'll go to there. That way we don't walk on top of each other. And then I'll bring the feed in here shortly. So let's go ahead and let's bring in the guests that we have. And, dude, we got a superstar with us. Had no idea, Frank.
I had no idea he's a neighbor.
Yeah. Well, he's like 40 minutes down the road from you now.
That's right.
All right.
Exactly
But one of the guys that's going to be part of the watch party today, Drew Gregory, who is the reigning Hobie Kayak Angler of the Year. And he is actually going to be coming on BTL once a month to talk a little bit about kayak fishing, because honestly, Matt and I don't know anything about it. It's not that we got anything against these guys. It's just we've never really been around it, haven't been around the guys. So what a better way to have the BTL fans out there really, I don't know, kind of interact with a guy that is the man when it comes to kayak bassing. So let's bring him in now. Drew, thanks for being on the watch party, man.
Hey, guys, thanks for having me. And here you go. This is it right here. This is what you get. The Hobie Bass Open Series Angler of the Year trophy.
Look at that.
I'll be trying to defend that this year.
He's sporting the hardware there, Frank. Jeez.
Yeah, I know. Holy moly, man.
Who knew there was such hardware in the kayak world, right, Frank? You didn't know.
That's right. No, I did know. Kayak fishing is probably the fastest growing part of this sport today. The kayak sales have been literally doubling the last 2 years. So it's growing like mad.
Yeah, that's cool stuff. So, Drew, thanks for being on the watch party. And I know a lot of the kayak fans out there are going to look forward to your report that you're going to have on BTL in the upcoming months. Also, he is going to be a guest on BTL next Wednesday, Frank.
Outstanding.
So we'll dive into the whole kayak world a little bit more next week. All right, let's bring in our next guest. Colby, how you doing, man? He's got his mic muted.
Hey, Mark. Yeah, I'm doing good, man. Just glad to be on here and just ready to watch big bass get caught, man.
Yeah, down in Florida. I like it.
You're going to see some for sure.
Oh, there's already been a few caught this morning, so maybe we're going to get to see a 10-pounder.
Yeah, that would be cool. All right, next guy to join the party, the man that won the Apex Games, Mr. John Bird III. John, how you doing?
Doing good. Good morning, guys.
All right, man. Glad to have you on board. And I see a lot of that stuff that you won in the Apex Games right behind you there.
Yeah, it was so much. It took about 2 hours to hang all that stuff up. So
that's awesome. All right, and then the last person we're going to bring in here, Chris in New Hampshire. Chris, how you doing?
Good. How's it going, guys?
Good.
Doing great. All right, let's do this. Let's go ahead and cue up the action. And there we see one of the Johnston brothers. Frank, that looks like typical Florida to me.
Yeah, it is typical Florida. You see that ridge of lily pads he's running down? Those are growing on a sandbar right there. So he's motoring. All he's doing is looking for a bed right now. Very traditional spawning areas, those long fingers of pads that stick out. You know they're on a high spot, and more than likely it's sand. And the cool thing about Florida is the water in Florida is like Coca-Cola colored. But when you see a bed, the bed like is glow orange. I mean, they stand out so much. You can see them far away. So that's really what he's doing. He's not even making a cast. He's just hunting right now.
All right, Frank, let me ask you this. Typical sight fishing in Florida, is it any different from the aspect of a lot of times you like to catch the male, you get the male out of there, and then boom, you position your boat and you position and set up everything to catch the female. Is that typical?
I don't like catching the male first, although unfortunately they're usually the first ones you catch if they're both there. I prefer to target the female first because I'm afraid if I snatch the male, the female's going to leave.
Oh.
It's kind of like steelhead fishing. If you catch the female, the males that are behind her leave. So it's a little opposite. You know what I mean? So I kind of try to catch the female first and then get the male if I need that one. But it's tricky because, you have to understand the fish's mood, and it's not all the time that you find them both on the bed at the same time.
All right, let's do this. Let's see if I can pull in the audio. I know the feed that they're on right now is a Skype feed. So let's see if I can pull in some audio.
That being on the sidelines and watching?
Well, the competitor in me hated it. Obviously, I didn't like it at all. But the bass fishing studio and the studionato that I am, I loved it. And that amount of exposure that the guys got, I was really jealous of that, Mark. I won't lie to you. That made me want to be out there even more. But it was just amazing to watch how proficient all of our new guys are, how good these guys are at fishing, and some of the things I would have done, and some of the things I learned a few things or two that I'll be honest with you, I learned a couple of things.
Mark, you talked like you said, maybe you do know where the winners are. You know where that zip code is. Is that right? Or are you still working on that problem?
Well, I've got some old post office boxes down the lake there, Tommy, that caught some of those giants, and I don't think they're quite there yet. Tomorrow, I will definitely get the right tide at the right time, and I will go visit some of those just for old time's sake, for fun. But I'm going to have 5 before I go down there, I promise you.
Mark, real quick, you have fished this lake when there was vegetation to where there is nothing anymore. How has this entire system changed since the first time that you've come to the St. John's?
Well, I fished my first pro tournament here, Mark, in 1987 on college break. And at that point, it was a wintertime deal. It was cold, and it was brutal. 20 pounds won the tournament for 2 days. And it goes in cycles. Rivers goes in cycles. And right now we're in a cycle where there is no vegetation, and it spreads the fish out, Mark. It puts one on a cypress tree, one on a whatever, one on a little stick, one on a boat dock, and they get real. It makes it tougher. You got to cover more ground. And with that being said, it doesn't concentrate those, and those big fish become much harder to catch and much more leery. So as you can see, I'm playing little Guns N' Roses this morning. I'm in the jungle, and I have a lot of targets. I have to fish it all because one will come on the outside, one will come between a tree, and one will come on the bank. So I'm just old style Florida fishing, a light slip sinker. And Marky, I got one of my favorites out here. I got the old monkey on the end of the rod, the old space monkey.
Sweet child of mine. Sweet child of mine, Tommy.
All right, there we have it. It's kind of funny and ironic that the very first watch party of the year is Mark Menendez featured.
Yeah.
We were doing it last year.
That's poetic justice, man.
Yeah, that's kind of cool. All right, that's a cool shot right there that we're looking at, Frank. You got Mark doing what he's doing. You got Carl in the canal fishing walls and docks and all kinds of other things, obviously sight fishing. You got Derek that is in a fairly large area, and then you got Johnston who's in a backwater area with a bunch of lily pads. That pretty much sums it up, doesn't it?
Yeah, I mean that's typical Florida. It's very diverse in as far as that goes. You can see that Mark is not sight fishing right now. Mark is actually fan casting the area, trying to cover as much as he can, every little nook and cranny in there, but he's really not sight fishing. If you look at Johnston, you know he's sight fishing. You saw him motoring before, not moving, keeping the boat going, and now he's stopped. So now he's working one. And Carl is probably sight fishing as well. He's not really blind casting, except for, of course, that cast when I said that. And that's just how this game goes. You always you always want to put your bait in front of a fish, you hope, anyhow. But and Derek is sight fishing. It looks to me like he's sight fishing. He's like on it. Whatever he's on it right now. It's funny. I don't sight fish with spinning gear, and I see a lot of these guys using spinning gear, and it drives me crazy.
Yeah, Drew, you had a question?
I did. So, Frank, I'm sure you'll probably go over this on the day 4 show at some time. But since we have so much sight fishing going on here, and on beds, obviously, particularly, we saw Carl Jocumsen catch a fish off of a white colored bait. I love a white bait. I love to be able to see it, something bright. What's your take on that, the color, when you're sight fishing these bass off the beds?
Well, he's using white so he could see it. He's not using white because the bass want white. He's using white because he could see it. It's a tricky. Like, I'll be honest with you guys. I don't finesse fish when I sight fish. I power fish hard. I'll throw a heavy jig. I'll throw it on 20-pound fluorocarbon, and I get the bass so mad on the bed. You can see her attitude. If you pitch in there and the bass leaves, that fish is not catchable. You're going to spend way too much time trying to catch it. If I pitch in there and the bass stays, then I can catch that fish. So when I'm sight fishing, I move fast. If I see him on the bed, I make a throw. If she stays, I stop and I catch it. I use the heavy jig because I bump it into her a little bit. I get her real mad. I just bump her with it, and she gets mad. And then when she turns on it, I take it out of the water, and then her fins go out, and she starts looking around. And then I throw it back in there, and usually it never hits the bottom. She just smokes the thing. I've sight fished with light stuff and spinning gear, and it's just too painfully slow for me. Yeah. It's not my style.
I agree. I'm with you. I just go all, usually braid, they don't seem to care, obviously, about the color, the lure. They're just annoyed at what's in their bed. And you got to find that little spot sometimes. It can be like the size of a quarter.
Well, that's about right. I mean, that's what it is. It is about the size of a quarter.
It is very, very small. And, like you said, you can annoy them. And it's actually a cool fact about the bass, guys. You'll see them back up sometimes to get an angle on. They only have one blind spot. Pretty much one blind spot, and that's right in front of their nose, very close. They got to back up, turn a little bit on their side, and hit it the way their eyes are. They can nearly see, 360 degrees with that one little blind spot. And when you see them do that back up, there's nothing like catching fish off a bed.
Yeah, when that fish starts to look at your bait, you got her, because it's getting her aggravated. They don't hit out of hunger when they're on their beds. They just get it off the bed, and that's what. People don't understand. It's not a strike for food. It's a strike for survival. She's protecting whatever she's got in that bed.
Yeah, and I keep my finger on the line. I don't know if you do that, Frank, but on a bait caster, I keep my finger right there on that line. And honestly, you guys can probably tell when I start talking, I'm a little spastic, a little ADHD. I don't even want to see the fish bite it half the time because I feel like I'm going to pull it away before she actually eats it. But if I can keep my finger on the line, then I can, then I almost like have to close my eyes, kind of like Topwater with me. I could feel a lot better, with straight braid when, again, I don't think they really care. And Flora is probably, nearly sensitive. And then obviously you feel that telltale sign, that thump, they got it. So cool. Thanks for answering that one.
Hey, Nate, welcome to the watch party, man.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Yeah. All right, Frank, typical stuff that we're seeing so far. We saw that one shot where they had 4 different anglers in there. But yesterday, a wrench was thrown into a lot of guys' game plans. Fog delays. How did you really deal with fog delays when you were on the Elite Series?
I didn't make adjustments for the time loss. If I had fish a million miles away, I went and got them. When you stop and you make an adjustment based on the fog, sometimes it can hurt you because you're not on your best stuff. So I made a rule when I started fishing that from now on, whatever happens, I go to my best stuff first and take my chances when I get there. And that's really it. Like right here, this dude, he's throwing the devil's horse, it looks like, right now. The Smithwick Devil's Horse is one of the best topwater baits in Florida, and I love throwing that thing around the spawn. You catch so many fish on it. It's a very subtle topwater presentation, but it's one of my favorites. And I can't really make out the lure very, very well, but I think it is a Devil's Horse or something close to it. Yeah. It's a double prop bait anyway. But yeah, so I don't really change my game plan up for fog. I know these guys did in this event because they lost like 4 hours or something crazy like that. So I know they did, which is why you got to watch the weights today, because it's going to change dramatically today. That I guarantee.
Yeah. This prop bait that we're looking at right now, I mean, that is a staple in Florida.
Absolutely, dude. Florida made the Devil's Horse famous a million years ago. When I fished the Devil's Horse up north for smallmouth too. That's a little secret trick there. The smallmouth can't stand prop baits. The Devil's Horse, the Crazy Shad, is one of my best smallmouth topwater baits, other than a Super Spook Junior.
Yeah. Interesting fact about yesterday. Klaus, the leader after day one, he caught all of his fish within an hour. Has that ever happened to you? I mean, think about how cool that is. You got a fog delay. You stick with the plan that you had. You go out and you catch a 25-pound limit in an hour.
Yeah, you know what? You're living right. You're living really right when that happens.
Fortuitiveness.
Oh yeah. Sometimes I'll make a dummy cast first because I don't want to catch one on the first cast, so I'll cast somewhere else to not catch one on the first cast because I feel it's like a jinx. But I've had tournaments where I've gone out, pulled up on my first spot, and it was like raining money. So those days are really good. They're far and few between, I'll be honest with you. I mean, in the Bassmaster Classic in 2010, I caught the first limit of the Classic on 5 casts, and unfortunately, they only weighed like 9.5 pounds.
Well, it is what it is, Frank. You had the first 5, man.
I did, and I was so far up a creek arm that we couldn't get any service. And the marshal that was in the boat with me, he was freaking out. He's like, I don't have a signal. I can't report this. I go, relax, dude. It doesn't really matter. It's 9 pounds.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah,
but,
I'm with you.
So,
all right. Hey, for the people out there watching, if you have a question, just raise your hand. I'll see it in the queue, and you can ask Frank a question. Frank, one thing real quick as we look at that shot of Corey Johnston. Look at the boat in the background. I don't know who that is, be it another competitor, be it just somebody that's out. Boat traffic in these canals and lanes in Florida, that's got to be a bad thing, especially when the spawn's going on. What are your thoughts on that?
If it's a popular canal and it gets a lot of constant boat traffic, the fish don't care. If it's a private little area that doesn't see a lot of boats, then it gets real tricky. I've been fishing in marinas where guys have their pleasure boats idling, and I'm literally catching bass out from underneath their boats, and their motors are running. So where they're accustomed to that, it's just part of everyday life. Where they're not accustomed to that, it really gets them skittish. I don't know. Corey Johnson's a better man than me because I'd be coming unglued right now.
Yeah. All right. Any questions out there?
I got one.
All right, John, what do you got?
So it's kind of tying back onto what Drew was talking about. So when you're sight fishing and you have like you hear a lot of guys talk about the particular style of bait. Like I know they said like a lizard is like a predator to a bass and their babies, and you'll see them using like a lizard. You may see them using like a beaver. I've even caught them on like a shaky head. So at what point, like, what do you think is a good go-to bait when you're talking about a fish that's on the bed?
Well, generally when I'm sight fishing, I got a half-ounce jig on and I have a lizard. And I'll throw the jig in there first because normally I can catch them on the jig. If I don't, I'll go to the lizard. You have to understand anything that's crawling and squishing around on the bottom, bass can't differentiate between real and non-real. So anything rooting around in their bed is going to make them angry. So my theory is this. The tiger salamander, which is really what the lizard imitates. It doesn't imitate a lizard at all. It's really a salamander or a newt. So these are aquatic animals and they do eat fish eggs. So bass are very accustomed to seeing these things and getting rid of them. Bluegills are another thing. If you ever watch a bass on a bed, a bluegill swims by and the bass will run it down like it's his job. Yep. So you got to keep those things into your head when you're playing the sight fishing game. I don't think you got to get as finessey as a lot of guys get. I don't waste my time on fish I can't catch unless it's a giant. If it's a giant, I'll spend time on it. Generally, when you pitch in the bed, you got to look at the attitude of the bass. If she starts getting finny with you, starts swimming around in a circle, if she swims around in a circle, when you throw something in there, you're going to catch that fish on the next cast, probably. If you pitch in there and she leaves, she's not quite ready yet. You got to do too much playing around, and I don't play around with them because time is not your friend. When you have an 8-hour day, time matters. So that's kind of, I don't make sight fishing hard. It's my least favorite type of fishing to do, actually.
Yeah.
And kind of
I'm sorry. Go ahead, John.
Oh yeah. Kind of as a follow-up, as far as like the lens color of like your sunglasses, because they say you need good sunglasses. Do you use like a green or do you use like a blue? Like what are your thoughts on that?
I use amber. I always use amber. I think amber takes the brown from the bottom and everything else becomes more visible. Especially smallmouth fishing. When I was sight fishing for smallmouths a lot, amber, I could see the smallmouths way before anybody else could see them, and I can see them deeper. Looks like Gary's got another good one going here.
Yeah. Now, this is cool that they're showing Gary right now, because what does it seem like the characteristics that he is targeting right now, Frank? Obviously, that's not the bank, maybe shallow hump-like sand kind of stuff, isolated twigs.
Well, here.
Dang.
That's a nice fish right there, guys.
Yeah, that's a good one. Oh, that one got a little deep there.
Yeah.
But here's the thing. If you look in the background and you look at what he's fishing, you see those isolated stobs sticking up over there. He's fishing a high spot, and generally speaking, I can tell by what I'm looking at now, it's all sandy. So he's looking at the high spot. All them dark spots you see on that sand, eventually the bass will spawn around those because they want some type of they feel better with something around them when they spawn. So those isolated high spots are money, especially in Florida. And what I found, even on Okeechobee, when I was on Okeechobee, that when I found isolated spawning grounds like that, the bass tend to be much bigger. They feel more comfortable out there. They don't have to be on the bank. All they have to have is the right depth and the right sun penetration for them. So they don't have to be on the bank. That's in my opinion, that's a money spot right there. And he's probably got 5 or 6 other ones just like it somewhere else.
Yeah, that's true. Actually, guys, I've noticed the same thing. What Frank's talking about, some of these bigger fish, even in fisheries in Louisiana, Texas, like Southeast Texas, sometimes they'll be out on the biggest cypress trees out in the middle, the loners in the middle of the lake on those cypress knees spawning in those areas, totally random away from everything else. I don't know, Frank, if you feel like they feel safer there, they're more secluded or what, but those biggest fish I have seen, like in rivers and creeks in a kayak, they'll be in the middle of a river or creek on an old root ball right out there on the top of it. And it's just kind of a little bit more hidden and secluded there, I think.
Yeah, and it's close to where they're going to be when they're done spawning as well. They're not traveling far from their summer haunt. It's a good stopping point. Okay, now let's see. That's a buck bass right there.
Yeah.
That's a little male. Now you see what happens is if you look at how Gary's fishing and you look at this stuff here, okay, Gary actually his spot is a smart spot because it's a very small area he has to cover to get his bites. Those fish are piling up on that high spot. It's a very small area. If you look at these spots here, these fish have a million places they could go to spawn. So it spreads them out much farther. They've got way more cover they can hide behind, and they can get away from you. You may not even see them sometimes with all that cover down there. So those open water areas, I tend to target them as well. Basically, I learned that from my smallmouth fishing. That when I found those places, those sandbars, isolated sandbars, smallmouth fishing, I would catch a lot of bigger fish on them, and they were easier to see and easier to target because they didn't have far to go.
Interesting. Now, for some people out there that may not know, what would be the best tactic for Gary to do with that fish? We saw he hooked it deep. It was bleeding a little bit. Cut the hook off, put it in the live well, put some chemicals in there, roll with it. What would you do, Frank?
Well, basically, when I would see, first off, when a fish starts to bleed immediately like that, two things occur. You either tongue hooked it or you broke a gill plate. You broke one of the gills.
Yeah.
If one of the gills is broken, the fish doesn't have too long. But if you tongue hook the fish and she starts bleeding from the tongue, I try to keep her on the other side, away from the other fish in the live well, and then I'll add my chemicals to replenish her slime layer and to settle her down. Because some of those things have like a small sedative in them for the fish, and so it settles them down so they don't beat themselves up in the live well. That's the first thing I would do. Back in the old days, we used to pour a can of 7-Up in the live well.
Yeah, I remember that.
Don't ask me why. maybe they just like that lemon lime flavor.
That's funny. All right, Chris, you have a question?
Yeah, I was just going to ask what you're using to put in the live well.
I use jungle juice. Back in the day, it was called jungle juice. That seemed to be the best to settle them down, but I didn't use that stuff on smallmouth. I just found that the largemouth behave better with it than the smallmouth do. So I use the jungle juice.
Copy.
All right, let me ask you this, Frank. Is it easier for the smallmouth guys to learn how to fish in Florida, or is it easier for the Florida guys to learn how to go north and catch smallmouth?
I think it's easier for the smallmouth guys to go south and catch fish. Way easier. The Florida guys, they have Florida's a fun place to fish. Look, I mean, the fish in Florida for the most part are shallow all year. Your techniques are all power fishing, shallow water power fishing. There are some lakes in Florida where we catch them on deep diving crankbaits and stuff. But for the most part, what you see is what you get. When a guy that lives in Florida goes up north to smallmouth fish, if the smallmouth are shallow, he's gonna do great because smallmouth aren't shy. They're very aggressive, and he'll have success. But when the smallmouth are on, deep ledges or deep rocky places, they're going to have a tendency to struggle a little bit because when you're structure fishing for smallmouth, it's insanely different than what you fish in Florida. It's very different.
All right, there you have it. A lot of people want to know, why is the prop bait so successful in Florida?
I don't know why it's so successful in Florida. I don't know the real reason behind it, but I can tell you that it's such a subtle presentation. And I don't know if it imitates something on the water that's just dying. If you ever see a bluegill or something on the water dying and they just flit a little bit and they just and they flit. But I'll be honest with you, I catch so many smallmouth on those prop baits, it's ridiculous. And so I just think it's the subtlety of the bait and the sound it makes. If you have a properly tuned prop bait like a devil's horse or a crazy shad, the sound it makes is just so appealing. And I think that's the real reason it works. Plus, think about it. You're fishing, 2 feet over their heads, and you're just making a little flit sound, a little. I mean, they just can't stand it. I wish I knew the real reason they liked it so much.
What
I don't.
What are those? Yeah, needlefish.
Yeah,
that's
some
what I was
people
going to
said
say.
that they mentioned that on the broadcast earlier too, about could be because the needlefish are prevalent in a lot of those waterways. So I don't know.
Well, the needlefish is an important food source there. There's no question about it.
Yeah. A lot of kayak questions, and Drew, we're going to get into those on Wednesday. All right.
All right.
Yeah. Glad we're going to have you on the show Wednesday because all the kayak questions, and I'll cue one up for you that you can think about is several people want to know, how would you set up the SJR for you if you had a kayak event on the SJR? So we'll talk about that on Wednesday.
Sounds good.
All right. Frank, let's talk a little bit about pre-spawn in Florida. That place that we saw Gary earlier, obviously with those stick-ups and everything, those fish are moving up there. Yesterday, Brandon Polinick talked about he was solely going to target pre-spawners. What did the pre-spawners set up on in Florida?
They'll set up on shell beds, a little harder bottom areas leading into where they're going to spawn. The cool thing about where Gary's fishing is they'll set up there for pre-spawn and stay to spawn. The thing with, Polinick was that he set out to target pre-spawners, but there was a lot more on the beds than I think he thought at the time.
Yeah. And once again, the influence on decisions that the fog delay had.
Yeah.
Huge.
Here, like cypress trees, when you got isolated stands of cypress trees, or if you got a whole row of cypress trees and then 2 are sticking out a little bit farther, that's kind of the stuff that I'll target in Florida for the pre-spawn. Right out in front of the cypress tree itself in the water, there's going to be a bunch of knees down there, and chances are there's going to be a shell bed down there, especially if it's got a little dip in front of it. I'll throw rattle baits in those situations. I'll throw the crazy shad, you know what I mean, or the devil's horse, and I cover a lot of water fast if I'm fishing for pre-spawners. But I'm constantly looking for the telltale bed because, dude, in Florida, you can see them a mile away. You really can.
Frank, several people are saying we need a day 4 show on the devil's horse.
Well, dude, I love to do that. I got some tricks for that lure that Smithwick will kill me.
All right. Hey, look, we have a wide variety of people that are watching where they fish at. Is there anything from the Florida stuff that we're fishing as fans and guys that fish across the country? What can we take from watching and the tactics that are used in Florida that can actually be used across the U.S.? What are some of the things that you would point out, Frank?
Well, a bass is a bass, no matter what. The only difference between the Florida strain and the northern strain is the Florida strain is really susceptible to cold fronts. Northern strain bass don't care. When I started fishing down south and heard everybody talking about, oh my gosh, there's a cold front, the bass aren't going to bite. I always thought they were crazy because I never had a problem catching them in cold fronts up here. They just aren't as affected. So that's probably the only difference as far as the tactics and techniques they're doing. All those tactics and techniques work everywhere you go. You may change lure color. Like a lot of the guys in Florida will throw black and blue and June bug. That's because it stands out better in the tannin colored water. Okay. So up north, we might throw green pumpkin with blue flake or watermelon. You know what I'm saying? That's about the only thing that's going to change is your lure color. But for the most part, what they're doing is exactly what you would do anywhere in the country when you're fishing for spawners. Now, here's a difference on lakes with zero grass in them. And zero shoreline cover, like all the cypress trees and stuff that you see in the background here.
Yeah.
The bass will spawn on inside corners of points.
Mhm.
So if you go into a pocket, the first place you're going to look is the first point on the inside corner of that point. That's where the bass will spawn. The other thing I noticed is they don't spawn in mass. Like, you're not going to see 30 beds in one corner. You might see 2 or 3, and then you move down and see a couple more, and move down and see a couple more. Like I've seen on Santee Cooper, I pulled into an area, and I've never seen so many bass in one place in my entire life. And that's just how it goes down there. Okay, they have way more fish that move into these bigger spawning areas. Now, some of the smallmouth spawning stuff, I've seen a lot of smallmouth in one area. But as far as largemouth fishing goes, generally you're looking for, a handful of beds in a corner. And always look, especially if there's no grass in the lake, always look for some type of object in the water, because they love to spawn by them, be it a dock pole or a cinder block or an old tire. Something in the water they spawn by. They want that other bit of protection on the side of them.
Yeah. All right, anybody? Anybody else have any questions? Drew?
Hey, real quick, we're talking about this devil's horse, and I'm curious as to why, Frank, you feel like this devil horse is coming out first and not the buzzbait. Because given how much vegetation's in Florida, me personally, I'd rather be throwing a buzzbait. I mean, I can make it look skinny like a needlefish too. You know what I mean? Just streaking across the surface. But this seems to be a little bit more of a finessey topwater approach we're using. And I don't know if it's just the fish aren't, they react differently to water that's, in the low or mid 50s. I don't know what the water temp is there, 60 degrees, maybe somewhere around there. But that could be like, to a fish in Florida, that could feel like, 35, 40 degrees to smallmouth and Erie. So maybe is that why they're choosing that little slower finessey topwater presentation first? And also, I just pulled the comments up. I want to say big shout out and thanks to all the kayak community that's joining the show today.
Yeah.
I see you guys, and thanks for tuning in.
Yeah, I like the subtle topwater when I'm fishing tight like that. If I'm not fishing tight and I'm covering water, I agree with you on the buzzbait. You can cover way more water much faster and more efficiently. But when I'm fishing tight, I've got the prop bait on. Like if you ever go down a iron retaining wall with all the little corrugations in it, you put that prop bait right up against that retaining wall and you just twitch it. It's deadly. Where you run a buzzbait down there and you might get a blow up, you might not get a blow up. But if the fish is tentative and he's not really sure, he can get under that bait because you're not really honking it in a million miles an hour. He can get under that bait and he could bird dog it for a while. And then all of a sudden he decides that's edible and I want it, and he gets it. So
would it change if the water's 80 degrees? Would that change then your choice? It would be the same. Okay.
No, when the water's hot like that, I'll start with a Super Spook Junior too, because I can cover fast water faster, But for the most part, I'm going to stick with that. See, now here he's got another buck bass going here, which is unbelievable to me, because with all them bucks around, you think he would get a female.
Right.
But that's what happens when you're in an area that spreads them way out like that too. You know what I mean? Where Gary's on that isolated stuff, those fish can only be in one area to spawn. So he's probably putting his bait in front of more bigger fish. And, so you just got to, there's all kinds of things you got to keep in mind. And every spot is different, especially in Florida. Even though they look the same, every spot is different. Like I don't get caught up. I don't get caught up trying to go way up in the back of long, skinny fingers, because the farther the bass have to travel, I think you're losing fish along the way. They're starting to spread out. They're starting to go things. So in Florida, I'll look for shorter dead end places right off the main lake, so I get a big influx of fish if I'm fishing that stuff. But for the most part, I'm looking for stuff that's offshore, shallower offshore stuff. Look, guys, I'm a structure fisherman by heart, by love, and by addiction. I can't stand sight fishing. Well, I can't say I can't stand it because I love fishing. So that's wrong. That's a lie. but I prefer. I'm more comfortable off the bank. So that's kind of what I focus on. And fish will spawn off the bank as long as what you're looking at is right for them. So when I get into situations where I have to go into these pockets, I pick short ones. It's easier to figure out where the fish are at. It's easier to catch them, and they don't spread out as much. I try to keep that as simple as I could.
Hey,
How much?
Who's got a question here? Chris?
Me.
Go ahead.
I'm all set.
Go ahead,
Sorry.
John.
Oh, so how much do you think that electronics play in these tournaments where you're doing a lot of sight fishing and stuff like that? Because I would think in my mind like the 360 will probably be kind of good, maybe, but I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, your electronics can be a great tool. The better you know them, the better tool they can become for you. But generally, when I'm sight fishing for fish, I'm only looking at my electronics for one reason only, and that's to find depressions and ditches in the shallow water or high spots in the shallow water. Sometimes I'll side scan down an area real quick, and when you side scan, hard bottom shows up bright white. So then I see all the hard bottom dots out there, and I know that those are either shell beds or a little harder bottom, and the fish can use that to spawn on. So that's really how I use my electronics during the spawn. Because when I'm in a shallow water situation where I'm just sight fishing, I usually turn my locators off, except for the one on the bow of the boat. I want as little noise as possible when I'm fishing.
All right. Hey, Drew, real quick, I want to ask this question. I know it's a kayak question, but I just want to know, how tough is it to sight fish out of a kayak?
Yeah, that's a good question. It takes a little bit of coordination, a little bit of skill, obviously, to stand in a kayak. But fortunately today, most fishing kayaks are made with that stability, in mind. And quite frankly, I even wrote an article one time that said, it was titled, "We're not fishing out of kayaks anymore," because we're really, in some senses, we're not. They're little miniature boats, and that's fine. There's nothing wrong with that. But that's they're tools, they're just like different lures are tools. Different kayaks are tools to get a job done. And I actually have 3 different kayaks I rotate between on the Crescent Kayaks line, a real small 10-footer that I can't stand in, that I go in little creeks, and then a 12-footer that I can stand in. I even have what we make called a solo skiff that's even bigger, and I can stand in it. So it's definitely more challenging, but we have the right tools for it today with how we make kayaks. And you have to have accessories on there that, Power Pole makes something called the micro anchor. You can just double tap and drive that straight in the ground once you spot the fish. And obviously, well, not obviously, if you guys aren't aware, 2 of the major tournament trails, national trails, allow motors. So if you've got a motor and it does have a spot lock or an anchor, I use motor guides, so I just hit the anchor button sometimes in more open water where the power pole won't work. And, you can definitely manage. I actually like to get as high as I can. If I can stand on something. See, I'm fortunate. I'm like 5'8" and blessed to have a little coordination. I'm not super tall, so I'm able to get up there as high as I can, even on little platforms sometimes, on a cooler even, and just get that extra little height advantage.
All right. Excuse me. Frank, that last shot that we saw throwing the Topwater, dude, I got to be honest with you. That looked freaking awesome. I mean, that looked like an explosion was going to take place any minute.
That's the fun part about fishing them things. When I fish them, my jaw hurts because I find myself grinding my teeth when I'm waiting for the. But this funny thing is with the crazy horse, a lot of the bigger bass that you catch just slurp it down. They barely make a ripple. They just suck it down, and then you lean in on them, and all of a sudden it's a 5-pounder. Like here, there we go. That's a good shot right there. But you see, I mean, this is typical Florida fishing. I can't even tell you. I mean, this is, these guys got a lot of rods out compared to what I would have out during that time, but that's fine. I mean, they got a lot of different flipping presentations out because of the sight fishing ordeal, but it's pretty cool. I mean, this is just so typical Florida. It makes me excited because we got 9 degrees and 3 feet of snow, I'm ready to.
All right, Chris, did you have a question?
Yeah, those green noodles he has in his live wells.
Yeah, they look like the green noodles. I think what he does is he runs. Here's the trick they do. They run their cull tags through those noodles, and it prevents them angling in around each other.
Oh, that's a good idea.
Yeah, that's pretty much why they do that.
It's like, saw it earlier this morning, and I wasn't sure what it was, but
it's a trick to keep them alive longer. No,
yeah. I was like, why is he doing that?
Because bass like to swim.
That makes sense
too.
now.
Yeah. All right. Any other questions? Anybody have any other questions? John, I had to mute you because your chair was chirping in there, making noise.
Sorry, I went ahead and cut it off on my headset.
All right. No, I got that covered. All right. Real quick, Frank. The reason that I asked the previous question about is there anything out of Florida that people across the country could take? I remember one of the craziest things that I saw at the time, but afterwards it made so much sense, is Matt and I talk about Grand Lake on the show quite a bit, obviously with the history that Grand Lake has in tournament fishing. But there was a guy, and you may remember him, Alan Head. Do you remember Alan Head?
Vaguely, but yes.
He fished the FLW Tour. He had a couple of FLW Tour wins, I think. But he was a stud in Oklahoma. I saw him throw a devil's horse around boat docks.
Oh, yeah, dude. Oh, man.
And, I mean, he came in one time with like 23 or 24 pounds, and that's what he caught them all on, was that devil horse around boat docks. And super, super long pauses in between the twitches that we would have, and it would just drive those fish crazy. So that was another example that I was looking for, that maybe somebody has used a Florida tactic on a lake that has nothing to do with Florida.
Oh, yeah, absolutely, dude. I fish that devil's horse up here all the time, especially for smallmouth. Now, when I go down south and the lake's got spotted bass, I fish them for spotted bass. We were on the Alabama River one time, and I went to the crazy shad, which is like it's Cordell's smaller version of the devil's horse. And I caught so many spots on that thing, I couldn't believe it. So then I came up here and fishing Lake Erie, some of the shallow places in Lake Erie, that devil's horse is amazing. St. Lawrence River too, same way. You throw it over the eelgrass and hold on. The only problem with up there is you catch too many northern pike too.
Yeah. All right. Hey, let's welcome to the show Colby. How are you?
Hey, I'm good, Mark. I don't know what was going on. I kept getting kicked out earlier, so I wouldn't mess with my Wi-Fi box, and it looks like it's working now.
Yeah, it's working now. So welcome. Anytime you have a question, just throw your hand up. I'll see it, and then we'll get your question in the queue. I am fascinated right now, Frank, with what Gary Klaus is doing. I think that is awesome.
I love it.
Is that the way that you would kind of approach? You
Absolutely.
talked about you're a structure guy, but obviously these fish are starting to move up and position on this shallow sand hump, bar, whatever you want to call it.
Oh yeah, this is me all the way. In fact, I got to be honest, man, my heart's pounding right now looking at that. I'm like, oh man, alive. I want to be there so bad I can't see straight.
Does it not look obvious though? Or do people just look at the bank and they don't think about stuff like this?
Well, here's the thing. People think that, they're looking for places that harbor a lot of fish, okay? So this is a place that people think that you can go and catch one bite off of. But it's not. This time of year, that's not the case. And fish are going to constantly keep moving up on these things, too, as this tournament progresses, all right? You could see in the background where he's throwing that frog, you can see in the background some of the dark spots on top of that high place. There's plenty of cover on that thing for the bass to hide and take shelter and to make their beds, okay? Mm-hmm. In my opinion, see, this stuff is way easier to fish than all that other stuff. And I love looking at and fishing at this stuff. When I was on Okeechobee, I found them spawning on these things. I call them mother-in-law tongues. They're arrowheads. Like arrowheads. I call them mother-in-law tongues because they're always flapping in the wind. Yeah. But
no,
But the bass spawn right up against those things. And so what I found was if I found a little tiny patch of isolated ones, that was the money, you know. And when they were long and there was a mile and a half of them, it wasn't so good for me. And so I started targeting the isolated stuff. And that's when I realized in Florida that I can take some of my smallmouth tactics up there and find better places to fish for my style. You know, everybody's style of fishing is different. Doesn't make it right or wrong. Obviously, guys are catching them, you know, fishing those long pockets and canals, and obviously guys are catching them out there on the main lake too. So, you know, this time of year is good because you can fish your style.
Yeah.
Very good. Any questions, Colby?
Hey, yeah, I was wondering, since this year they're saying that the grass is so depleted down on the St. Johns River, are they going to be more related to like hard structure or like hard spot shell beds since the grass is not prevalent this time, Frank?
Yeah, and here's a misnomer with that statement too. You know, they say the grass isn't as prevalent as it was, and it's clearly it's not. You can see that. But during this time of year, the bass are always going to look for harder bottoms, even within the grass. Okay, so what I would do in this situation, if I knew that my tournament days were going to take me back here, okay, everywhere that I found hard bottoms now with no grass, I would mark in my GPS, because then when the grass comes up, I would go there with my punch and stuff, and I would punch right on top of those hard spots. So basically the bass are using the exact same places. The only difference is there's no grass to them. Okay. Now they won't occupy where the big grass flats were and just roaming around on the outside edges of the grass. That's more of a post-spawn summer technique down there anyway. So you wouldn't be fishing that stuff now. You know what I'm saying? What happened back in the day when they sacked the tar out of them over there, the bass were spawning on those sand flats and those shell beds, but the eelgrass had grown up over them. So the eelgrass, with the tide going in, tide going out, the eelgrass will lay over depending on which way the current goes, okay? And the bass would be spawning right underneath those. That's why when you saw, if you watched this tournament a few years ago when they were there, they were flipping that eelgrass, but the beds were underneath because the eelgrass is long and it would lay over with the current. And so the bass would be spawning right underneath them. That's the difference. Now they don't have that canopy.
All right,
well,
Frank,
I was just asking because.
Go ahead. No, go ahead, Colby.
Well, why I was asking is because I live on Old Hickory, and we have our grass comes back and forth in spurts, and
Yeah, his internet is not very
I'm
good.
losing. Colby, I lost you, dude.
Yeah,
sorry.
Your internet is not cutting it. Sorry, Colby.
not manageable.
No. That's too bad. Wow.
Yeah.
All right, Frank. I went brain dead. I cannot remember, but what Klaus is doing, it reminds me of the lake that's on the Harris chain that everybody fishes.
Oh yeah, that is.
And the only reason I say that is because I can distinctively remember when we covered that event.
Eustace.
Yes, the guys would go out and you'd see cane stuck in the sand all over the place.
Oh yeah, dude. Yeah, I think that was Eustace.
Yeah.
It had these long flats that came out, and the cane would grow way out on them.
Yeah.
You know where I experienced that, dude? On Clear Lake.
Really?
When I was on Clear Lake, these bulrush flats would go way out into the lake. But when we were there, it was early in the year. It was during the spawn, pre-spawn spawn. And these cane flats would go way out. And I had run into this dead cane in 5-6 feet of water, 200 yards offshore. So I picked up a swim bait and just started chucking it around there and started catching fish in them. And I'm like, holy smokes, you know what I mean? This is like fishing in Florida. And so I've seen it there too. And it works everywhere. Up north, we'll have It's not. It's bulrushes up here. It's really not maiden cane. It's bulrushes. Yeah. The problem with our bulrushes is they grow in the mud up here. So chances are, if you're fishing bulrushes here, it's muddy bottom. You know what I mean? And the fish will use them to stage before they go in. You know, and up here they'll spawn on the lily pad roots themselves. If you have a lot of silt, they'll spawn right on top of the roots of the lily pads.
Gotcha. Do the Florida guys have an advantage, Frank? Honestly, through history, through your experience in Florida, do the Florida anglers truly have an advantage?
Yeah, 100%. Look, I fished against the guys that live down there all the time. If you know where the biggest fish spawn, they generally spawn in the same places, and and they know this. So they know, for example, if they run into one lake and the fish aren't spawning, they know they can go to this other lake and will be spawning. So they know where everything is taking place on each of those bodies of water. Because basically Florida is just like massive canals and massive lakes connected together. And everyone has a different behavior. Everyone could have a different watercolor too. You know what I'm saying? And so these guys know exactly which one of those bodies of water they need to be in based on the conditions. And that's a huge advantage, because you don't have, think about it, you fish the elites, you got 2.5 days of practice. You don't have that to your, you don't have the amount of experience to your advantage over there. Now, as you fish them more and more, you get that experience, but you're talking about, you're waiting, another year before you go back, where these guys live there and they're out there all the time. That's their lake in their backyard. They know it inside and out.
All right. Any questions? Drew?
I was going to mention something, and maybe the folks watching who are listening to the actual, BASS live stream can confirm this or not, but it almost looks like Gary, I'm looking at my map here, is in Spring Garden Lake. And what's unique about that is you'll notice Gary's fishing something that's got a totally different color than, most of the other little lakes in the main river, with that black water, like we talked about. Obviously, some of them are spring fed. You got, Salt Springs and Juniper Springs and all the different spring fed fisheries. And this lake, if that's correct, that's where he's at. It looks like the right clarity I'm looking at. And I can even see those individual, reeds and bulrush, if you will, out there in the middle. It looks like he's fishing. So I think it's cool. He may have found just the right combination of, because that's going to change the water temp. It's going to change the dynamic of that ecosystem. He might have found the right combination of the exact perfect storm of pre-fish aggression, you know what I mean? With the big females are right at it, you know what I mean? Whereas some of the other places may not have that. So any thoughts on, the different water clarity in different places like that, Frank, the springs that are coming in, and just what are you searching for? Because me personally, I'm searching for the most aggressive. I'm chasing that pre-spawn wherever I can, the most aggressive, the most comfortable water temperature where the fish are just ready to hammer a moving bait, like a chatterbait, for example. That's my style. So that's what I look for. So.
Yeah, generally the spring, I've been down there. I fished the St. John's a few times. The spring-fed lakes, especially in the springs, are so clear. The water's like drinking glass clear. Yeah. I stay away from that stuff. It's harder to catch them. You could see them, they could see you. You're making huge long casts. I stay away from that. I try to stick to the watercolor where I can see down about 3 or 4 feet. I want that Coca-Cola color, or I want that not light brown, like where Gary's fishing, it looks light brown, but it's not really light brown. It's just not as gin clear as some of the other places. Right. It's still very clear, because I can see that on the screen. I can see the dark spots and stuff underwater. So it's still relatively clean, but it's not that drinking glass clarity. And that's kind of what I focus on. Look, the fish where he's fishing, the fish are going there to spawn. So he's getting pre-spawners and spawners. And then eventually there'll be some post-spawn, if there isn't even post-spawners already, because, down in Florida, dude, I've seen them spawning in December. So, I mean, you have to realize that he put himself in a very, very good position where he's at and what he's fishing.
It's a long run. If that's where he's at, that makes sense that he has such an incredibly long run to get there.
Yeah, and that's just the nature. You know, when I was down there, my run was just under 2 hours and 45 minutes. It was just under that.
Wow.
To get there. Of course, I never made it.
What happened?
I was cutting through Lake George, and it was blowing pretty good. There was 3 to 4 footers running down the center of George. And one of those telephone poles, Lake George is full of telephone poles. It used to be an old bombing practice site. So they put plywood on telephone poles, and they would drop dummy bombs. They didn't blow up. They were just dummy bombs to hit these things. Well, one of them had cracked, and more than one, but when they hit them, sometimes the telephone poles crack. And with all the wave and the current and the tide, some of those poles get below surface. Well, I was staying in the boat lane, but one of the poles had drifted out. I didn't know it was there because it was under the water, and I hit it, and it literally went in the hull of my boat by the front cleat and tore the whole bottom of my boat all the way past my driver's seat out. So I had a hole about 14 inches wide, probably 12 feet long underneath my boat. When I got to the other end of Lake George, and I went to go into the canal, and I shut my boat down, my lids blew up like there was a bomb in there. They blew up, and the whole boat just went whoa and was full of water. I never even got to make a cast in that tournament. Yeah, that was a bummer.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was a definite bummer. Yeah, but I mean, and that's kind of, and nobody was catching them in that tournament. And I was fishing isolated grass patches in the middle of one of those lakes with a rattle spot and a lizard, and I was plowing them. I mean, plowing them. In fact, a buddy of mine, by the time I got back to my hotel, it was probably 10:30 at night because I had to get towed in. Then I had to try to get the boat out, but I had to go back to the hotel, back to the ramp, get my truck, and go back. And it was longer drive by car than it was by water. So by the time I got back to the hotel room, it was like 10:30, and my buddy was like in the parking lot bumming out, and I'm like, "What's up, dude?" And he's like, "I only caught one fish today." I go, "You want to get a check?" He goes, "Yeah, how am I going to do that?" So I said, here's 7 waypoints. It's a long run, but you'll get a check. And he ran to him, and he wound up getting a check out of the tournament. So, yeah, I was like real thrilled. I was real thrilled about it.
That had to total your boat. Did it not total it?
Oh, yeah, dude. Yeah. That boat was, I could have broke it up and sold it for toothpicks.
Oh, wow.
That boat was literally, when I say cut in half.
Yeah.
Here, I'll tell you what happened. So the boat fills with water. I get the boat and I start motoring to try and get to some type of shoreline. And I got the boat and I'm plowing and the nose is way up in the air. I tell my non-boater, who, by the way, today we're like super good friends. His name is Warren. So I'm like, "Warren, spider crawl up the top of that boat. Look down. Tell me what you could see." So he does his little crawl up there. He grabs the front of the boat. He leans over. He turns around. He goes, his eyes are like that big. I go, "What do you see?" He goes, "I see everything." I go, "What the hell is everything?" He goes, "Dude, I could see inside your boat." And I'm like, "Oh my gosh." So I put the boat on a sandbar and called the rescue guy to come and get me. And he shows up with a little like 2.5 horse pump with a little 2-inch tube. And I look at him and I go, "What are you going to pump out of my boat with that thing, dude?" You know what I mean? I go, "You got to go get something for real." So he goes, "I'll be back in an hour." So he comes back and he comes back and he literally with 2 more guys, and he's got 2 guys to lift this motor up, and it had like a 12-inch tube on it. So we put that in my boat, we fired it up, and it's blowing like a geyser of water 30 feet in the air, and all of a sudden my boat starts to float a little bit, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And he goes, "All right." He goes, "Follow me back to the tow yard." I go, "What do you mean follow you back, dude?" I said, he goes, "I got to take my pump back. You can't have that pump in your boat." I go, I'm not good driving anywhere without that pump running. If you want me to follow you, you leave that thing in my boat. So it's kicking out water because all I'm doing is running water through my boat. I'm like a log basically. So I had to convince him to let me keep that pump in my boat. Otherwise I couldn't go anywhere. It was filled with water to the gunnel. I mean, it was just full. So anyway, so we got it back and they put it on a lift and pulled it out of the water. And I'm like, I looked underneath that thing. I'm like, oh my God. I said, what am I going to do? I got a tournament after this on Okeechobee.
Oh, geez.
Yeah. So needless to say, I bombed out of 2 events, spent about, $10,000 to total a boat.
Oh, wow.
Well, maybe Wednesday I'll tell you guys a story about how I hiked through the swamp in the Kissimmee chain for 4 hours of my tournament day. Hiked my kayak through a swamp, and why and how that happened. So another horror story for you there, Frank.
Outstanding.
Yeah.
You're lucky you didn't get bit by a snake.
Oh yeah, I saw some 15-foot gators, and I got some stories about that. But Mark, you see in the comments, they're getting restless over here in the comments on us. We haven't talked about Jakobsen's swim bait he's throwing, his glide
I know.
swim bait. I mean, they're getting restless on us.
I know. I'm trying to multitask here. With somebody not in the studio, it becomes a little bit tougher to try and cover everything. So it's not that I'm ignoring them. I'm not. I'm just. I got a lot going on here. Sorry about that.
All right, we better focus on the tournament.
But I don't know what swim bait he's throwing.
Yeah, I have no idea. Does anybody know?
I don't know what kind of swim bait he's throwing. I can't see it long enough.
It looked like he's certainly looking for a big bite at this point. There's no doubt about that. I mean, it was a wake bait. It looked like it was a hard bait, jointed, just waking the surface. Had a nice action to it. Maybe someone in the comments.
Oh yeah, here. See, let's see here. Steve. See, when I do that, I cover up Chris. I don't really want to cover up Chris, but that's okay. Sorry, Chris. See what?
No worries.
What Topwater
No worries.
Carl is throwing. So
yeah, maybe they'll show them again, and then I'll take a better look.
Yeah. Hey, somebody, this one right here. Hang on. This deal here about the whole Frisco thing with Carl. Now he lives in Tennessee. What happens is whatever city that they register according to the Bass records, when you pay your entry fees, he used to live in Frisco, so obviously they just haven't updated their files, and they're looking at that file going, oh, he lives in Frisco. So they put Frisco up there on the graphic. That's why that is. They just haven't updated it.
Yeah, they did that. When I fished, they had my wife's name spelled wrong and forgot one of my kids.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So I just told my kid, I said, well, that's because you're really not mine.
Man.
Hardcore. That is hardcore, right?
Okay, hang on. Here, let me throw this up here. I haven't even read this whole thing. Frank, we see that a lot of guys are targeting the shady sides of canals and everything, yet Gary seems to be targeting something different. Can you discuss the choice to target the shade now?
Yeah, I think it's just probably because when they found the fish, they were spawning on that side of the canal. And so they're just fishing it because that's where the fish are, and they're not really worried about whether it's shady or not. When you find spawning fish, you got to fish them where they're at. And that's probably really why. As far as what Gary's doing, Gary's fishing, out in the middle of the lake. He's fishing those high spots out there. They'll spawn out there because it's probably only just a couple feet deep anyway where he's at. And when the tide comes up over there, the tide's not crazy, so it probably put another 8 or 9 inches of water on top of it. But that's really pretty much it. I mean, if you see these guys going down these canals, okay, they're fishing where they found fish in practice is what they're doing. And it's just that now there's shade on it.
All right, I'm looking something up here real quick. I don't know if this is still in here or not. Let's see here.
See, and it looks like Cliff is doing the same thing. It looks like he's fishing a little bit off the bank too.
Hooked up right now. Another buck. Not even going to keep.
No, but you'll have that, man. It's fishing.
Yep.
That lake Gary's fishing in is super shallow. It's only like 1 to 3 feet on the Navionics.
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
You can tell on the satellite imagery if that is correct. Does that seem like where he's fishing? Was it called Garden?
Yeah, from what I just looked on Google Earth Pro, and it seems like that's that lake, Spring Garden Lake. That's
Spring
what you're
Garden
saying.
Lake.
Yeah, it looks like it.
It's got Ponce de Leon springs flowing into it, so it's got a little spring-fed influence. And no, I like the way it looks. It's got different clarity, and kind of like what Frank was saying. It's not the gin clear drinking water, but at the same time, it's not the real black, thick Coca-Cola either. So
actually,
it's the end of the line too. There's no lake south of it.
Nope. Actually, he's in the lake that I was catching my fish at when I was down there.
Really?
Yeah, because I went up the spring to see the manatees when I was done practicing.
Yeah.
They go in there. They go in there by the tons, and there's manatees everywhere. And the water's so clear up that spring, you can see them all. It was pretty sweet, actually.
That's the lake you were trying to get to when you busted your boat?
Yeah. Yeah.
Hey, do you have any pictures of that,
Frank? Frank right now.
You know, I don't have any pictures of that. It's something that I keep trying to forget, but it keeps coming up. You know how it is. Yeah, it was a bummer, man. I mean, it was a bummer. I spent a lot of money to crash a boat.
Hey, here's another question. Let me throw this one up here. Would a floating rogue work in this situation?
Absolutely. The suspending, floating, rattle, and rogue was my backup pattern in that tournament. And I was throwing it in a color back then they made called brim, which really looked like black gold chrome, but it had a lot of powdery metallic on it, and it looked just like a bluegill or a golden shiner. And that was my backup pattern in that tournament. I could go out and catch a limit pretty much anywhere I wanted on it, but the size wasn't there. So that's why I made that long run, because that lake I was in, the size was there.
All right, hang on. I want to check something out here real quick.
Do you think the size of the bait plays a part in what you use to sight fish? Because it looked like Gary was throwing like a Magnum ultraviolet speed worm.
Yeah, that's a very good worm down there. That worm, the thumping dinger, June bug, or black and blue flake is really good down there. It's a mainstay. And with the thumping dinger or the speed worm, you can put a 16th ounce slip sinker on and you could slowly creep it and it buzzes along the surface, which is another deadly technique because it's long and slender like the needlefish are.
Yeah, that's right. I don't know if he's sight fishing, Gary. I think he's he's just kind of, he was throwing a whopper plopper earlier even.
Yeah, it looks like he's was blind casting, but I'm sure that if one pulls up, he can see it.
Right.
Because I could see the bottom in that water. Now here, I think Matt sees a bed. I'm trying to see it on the screen.
Yeah, they're zooming into it.
I can't make it out with the ripples.
I can barely see it right there.
Yeah. They need a filtered camera lens.
Tell Matt to go in one of those springs for us. Come on, man.
Man, we are being awful critical. We're being awful critical, guys.
Yeah, if you guys only knew how difficult it is to pull this off and what they do, it's pretty amazing.
I do.
Very hard, very hard.
But I'm focusing on what they're doing, but it's when they're sight fishing like that, there's really not much to talk about as far as what they're doing. You know what I mean? And everybody has their choice of soft plastics when they're sight fishing. So it's kind of it's not a boring event, but it's tough to talk about because it's not a lot of crazy stuff going on. It's everything you would typically expect. They're sight fishing, and when they're running from bed to bed, they're throwing reaction baits. I mean, that's pretty much how this tournament's going to unfold. And it's going to get better. You watch. You'll see the weights are going to get better as this thing progresses. And that weather's supposed to warm up down there. Yeah, they're going to catch them. They are going to catch them.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting, I think, to see what really plays out here because, you got the guys that are truly just searching for the beds. And then obviously, like we've talked about here, fish are on the pre-spawn, some are possibly even post-spawn. And both are super aggressive times to catch fish for those guys who are, chunking and winding nonstop. So it'd be interesting to see if the folks who cover the most water trying to catch those fish, and then every once in a while just stumble on a bed and of course, catch it as well, win out, or if it's going to be truly the sight fishing that anchors their weights every day.
See, now we were just talking about the floating rogue. I think that was a floating jerkbait right there that Corey was throwing.
Hey Frank, do these Florida lakes all set up pretty much the same? Like I went down and fished Okeechobee in 14, and are they just a lot the same, or are they all different?
Yeah, they're pretty much all the same as far as what you're going to see and how you're going to fish them. Okeechobee's a tad different because you have the diversionary canal you can fish, which is deeper, steeper. You can get away with cranking, but Okeechobee's nice in the sense that Okeechobee has these huge flats that run way out into the lake, and there's old shell beds on them, and like I thought when I found them they were coral deposits, like old coral deposits, because they were hard and I could hardly get my Carolina rig through them. So Okeechobee's probably a little bit different, even though this is going to sound stupid, even though it's not different. Okeechobee just offers you more, I think.
Yeah, that was fun.
All right, here's another question. Frank, recently I picked up a couple of LureNet custom paint shop Pop-Rs. Where do you see the original Pop-R play in this event, in this environment?
Well, just like with the Devil's Horse, the Pop-R can be fished very finessey, and the Pop-R would work in this situation. Basically you would be, what happens a lot of times, like when the bass go in and spawn, if you can't see the beds, then I'll run the Pop-R on top of them, or a Houdini shad. I'll get them something to move on it. Once I see where they move, then I'll back off and I'll go to a super light slip sinker with a 5-inch dinger. And when I say light, I mean like 1/32 ounce, 1/16 ounce, back off, and then I'll pitch that blind casting if I can't see the beds. But generally, the answer to the Pop-R question is, I don't see why it wouldn't work in that situation, because you're not really hammering it home. It's more finessey.
Hey Frank, several people would they want to know what would be the best setup for the Devil's Horse, rod, reel, line.
All right. Well, when I'm throwing the horse, I like a 6.5 foot medium graphite. Don't use fluorocarbon, because fluorocarbon will sink the tip of it, and you won't get the same noise or action out of it. So I'll use mono. If I use braid, I'll use a light braid with it, like 15 pound, and then I'll put a mono leader on it, because the braid will have a tendency to wrap around the blade when you throw it. If it cartwheels in the wind, that braid wraps around the blade on it. So I'll put about a 3 or a 4 foot section of mono on it. And that's pretty much how I fish that bait. And I do that bait I tie directly to the line tie on it.
All right. Any other questions, guys?
Frank, what knot do you use to connect those? The crazy spiderweb FG knot, or what do you got going on?
FG knot. The FG knot's the best knot for braid to mono, braid to fluoro. There's no better knot. There's a million knots you can use, and there's a ton of them that work, but the FG knot is by far the best.
All right, let's see here.
Wasn't that emphatic?
It was. You must have like 12 hands and 13 arms and
two hands in your mouth. And that's about it.
Jeez. All right, Frank, how do you go about navigating a shallow area of a lake off of the main creek channel? Do you follow the creek bed or just drive slow? Do you use the trolling motor?
Well, if I can find the creek or the depression, I try to stay within the depression. If I can't, when I was competing, I had a hydraulic jack plate. So I'd crank the jack plate all the way up, trim the motor up a little bit, and just go. I wouldn't run on it on plane if I wasn't 100% sure what was below me. But I would idle and just go. I go where I got to go. If I get stuck with the big motor, I'll drop the trolling motor and push myself around. But, sometimes in some of those lakes, there's really no defined creek channel. I mean, the tide over there is always going to move silt away. So you're always going to be able to find some little ditch or little depression. But, once it gets flatter and wider, it's just going to be mostly just the same depth. So you just be careful and pick your way around, Time.
Time. Yeah. You wouldn't Tommy Biffle it. Tommy, just go.
No.
Oh, Tommy. Let's see here.
That's why he's got like 19 back surgeries.
Yeah. I kind of thought that he was going to retire this year, but he's fishing this year.
Yeah, good for him, man. It's hard. It's a lot of pain to be into fish all the time.
Yeah. Hey, Frank, if you were to fish a chatterbait, what would you throw it on? Where would you throw it? And what is a good trailer, if you don't mind me asking?
I don't mind you asking. I throw it on 17-pound fluoro. Again, I'm throwing a 7.5 foot medium graphite rod. 17-pound fluoro. If I'm fishing it in grassy areas, I'll throw it on braid. As far as a trailer goes, if I need to keep the bait off the bottom and slow it down, I'll use like a Christie Craw trailer on it or a Spine Craw trailer. If I need it to be more shaddy, if I'm throwing a shaddy one, I'll use a pulse minnow, a Yum pulse minnow swim bait on the back of it. They have a couple of sizes in it, so if I need to slow it down, I can put the bigger one on. If I need to keep it moving a little better, I can use the smaller size.
All right. Michael wants to know, can you do a show on the mental aspect of going from being an angler trying to win every tournament versus being a consistent angler that cashes checks? That might be a day 4 thing.
Yeah, let's make that a day 4 thing. That's a pretty good mindset. I mean, I'll just touch on it real quickly. Anytime I fish a tournament, I fish with the intent to win it. It's go big or go home all the time. Even like in 2010 when I made the Classic and won Angler of the Year, all I had to do is catch one bass to do that. I was already in the lead by so much. I just needed one bite.
All right.
And go ahead.
Oh, no. I'm sorry I interrupted you, but with this shot here, there's something that I want to ask you. So continue, and then I will ask the question.
Nah, go ahead.
All right. With what he is doing right there and the way that he is set up, let's just assume that there is a 6-pounder there. All right?
Yes.
How long would you spend on that fish if you had 3 hours remaining in the day?
I would use my jig technique on it, and if I couldn't get her fired up, I would spend about 15 minutes on it. If I couldn't get her to bite, I'd be gone. Some of them you're just largemouth or funky, dude. Some of them you're just not going to get to react. And it's unfortunate because you could leave that fish, a guy could pull in 20 minutes later and push that fish's button and wind up catching it. So, that's a judgment call based on what you think you can accomplish. I think if I can get my jig to her and I could bump her a couple times, I could get it.
Yeah.
But if she doesn't react, I'm not going to, because like I told you, I don't hate sight fishing, but it's not something that I relish. So I don't waste time on it. I try to catch them as fast as I can and go on my way.
I'm with you. Is it easy sight fishing for smallmouth, Frank?
Dude, they don't care. They come, dude, smallmouth, you throw something in on them, it's not even going down to their bed. They're coming up halfway to get it already. It's a completely different animal.
They're crazy. I mean, fishing in southern New Hampshire, there's not a lot of smallmouth, but when you get up north into like Winnipesaukee and the smaller lakes, there's a ton, and it's like a totally different fish. It's just crazy how they're nuts. And they're so aggressive.
I swear to God, dude, I didn't understand a lot of this, bed fishing stuff when I first started fishing Bassmasters. Oh, you got to beg them to bite. And I'm like, beg them to bite? Holy smokes, man. They run that thing down 4 feet to eat it. I didn't understand. I didn't know what cold fronts meant. I didn't know what begging a fish to eat meant. I just didn't know a lot of this because, it's not the same. It's just not the same animal. Not even close.
No.
No, spotted bass is pretty close. I don't have trouble catching a spot on the bed. They're pretty aggressive. I mean, they don't care. Winnipesaukee, dude, that place is crazy.
Yeah, it is.
I fished up there. One time I ran through there and you'll probably know the place I'm talking about. It's called the Witches.
I don't fish it a lot.
Okay, they call this place the Witches, all right? And it's this strewn boulder field. And when you go into this other
middle, I know where it is. It's got a small channel you got to go through if you're running. Yeah.
So I have no idea. It's the first time I'm there. So I go ripping through there, man. Boom, like nothing. Coming back, I'm fishing. It's almost dark. I got to go back, and now it's getting late. I go running back through there, boom, like nothing. Some dude comes up to me later. He goes, "Dude, are you out of your mind?" I go, "What are you talking about?" He goes, "You don't even know what you just ran through." I go, "I don't."
Yeah, there's channel markers through there. They didn't have any markers. You just couldn't see them.
Oh, dude, I couldn't see them. It was almost pitch black when I was leaving.
Hey, here's some props for you, Frank. Frank, thanks for hooking me up with the hydromotive engineering. Got my 4-blade in the other day. Can't wait to battle Champlain and not get my butt kicked with the 3-blade this year. So,
hey, was that a pun you made? Get my props in?
Yeah.
There you go.
You caught on to that one. Very nice.
Why he's a pro.
Good get, man. Good get.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. This has been great stuff, folks. Greatly appreciate you being involved. And don't forget, on Wednesday, we're going to have Drew on. He's going to be the featured guest with Matt and myself on the show Wednesday. And we'll talk a little kayak bassing. And the big thing, Drew, I made the commitment. I was going to get my 6'4" freaking nature butt in a kayak this year, sometime this summer. I was actually going to try and do it last year, but the whole COVID thing just went away and it didn't work out. But everybody says, even though I'm 6'4", I'm not going to have a problem fishing out of one, but I'm going to give it a shot.
Not at all. You'll love it. Trust me. You will.
Not with the new ones they have today.
Yeah.
They started doing that saltwater fly fishing in the flats on kayaks. That's where that thing originated from. And they have such stable platforms now that they even have belly bars for fly fishing where you put the belly bars on them. You could stand up and lean on them so you can fly fish with them.
Yeah. No doubt about it. We're going to learn a lot. You guys tune in. It's going to be a fun show. And a lot of even what Frank does on his day 4 show, getting into there's so many things that are different when it comes to being in a kayak than a boat. I mean, even the fact that the kayak is not such a solid, stable platform like a bass boat is, and you're moving forward a little bit sometimes towards the fish, even by the momentum that your lure is creating, whether it's a spinnerbait, a chatterbait, or a crankbait, and that creates slack in your line, and there's things you got to be aware of that just change the dynamic of bass fishing from a kayak and the boat positioning and different places you can get. Man, we're going to dive into it all, folks.
All right. Cool stuff. JB3, thanks for joining the show. And Chris, as always, man, appreciate you taking part in the watch party. We'll do this again. I don't even know where stop number 2 is. Where is stop number 2? Anybody know?
Tennessee. Fort Loudon?
Yeah, I think it's Tennessee.
Tellico? Yeah. Fort Loudon?
I believe so.
All right. So we'll do that again. And then we've got 4 days of Dean Rojas coming up on the Red Crest that he's going to co-host, and we're going to break down what's going on at Palestine for the Red Crest. Most importantly, a couple of things real quick, folks. Sunday night, 7 o'clock, Matt and I will be doing the very first Elite Series BTL post-game show. The plan is right now we will have the winner on. You will have an opportunity to ask the winner questions and just kind of give your input on what you thought about what went down at the SJR this past week in Florida. So make sure you check that out. It'll be directly on BTL. There will be a banner where you can click on it, and we'll roll that out on Sunday night at 7 o'clock. The other thing is, as I mentioned to Frank, we're going to get 14 to 18 inches of snow beginning on Sunday here in Oklahoma City. That has never happened before. The low on Monday is supposed to be 10 below zero. So needless to say, I'm not going anywhere. So what I'm thinking about doing is after we do the show on Monday, sometime Monday afternoon, Frank, I'm just going to kick back and play some music.
We're
going to do a little test run for the music and memory show that myself and Kelly Jordan are going to do on Tuesday. So Tuesday afternoon, hang out, do whatever you got to do, and listen to some of the tunes that I will play on Monday afternoon as we go through the test and get ready for Tuesday night. So as always, Frank, dude, you rock. You're awesome. Thank you for doing this. And folks, make sure you check out Day 4 right here on BTL with Frank Scalish. It is some great stuff. So everybody be safe. Frank, anything, man?
I'd like to thank Chris, John, and Drew for joining us today.
Yeah.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Enjoyed it, Chris and John.
All right, Great stuff. Drew, we will talk on Wednesday. Frank on Thursday. Everybody out there, be safe. Try and stay warm as we dig out here in Oklahoma City starting on Sunday. Frank, see you, man.
Adios, guys.
All right, that's it. We're out of here.